Welcome to Life Stories, where the simplest moments can lead to life's most extraordinary transformations. Today, we bring you an inspiring tale of kindness, resilience, and the unexpected ripple effects of compassion. Imagine a struggling diner owner, a rainy night, and an elderly man with a heartfelt story. What unfolds next will restore your faith in humanity. This is the story of Sarah, whose single act of generosity changed her life and the lives of many others forever. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Life Stories to start today's journey with us. Let's dive into the story. Sarah's Diner was a modest establishment nestled in the heart of Springfield, a small, unassuming town where everyone knew everyone. The diner sat at the corner of a quiet street, with 8 small tables and a counter that had seen years of service. It was a place where the scent of freshly baked bread and homemade soup greeted customers before they even walked through the door. The red and white checkered curtains, though faded, added to the charm, a nod to Sarah's hard-working spirit and her love for creating a warm, welcoming space. Sarah had owned the diner for 5 years, pouring her heart and soul into it while raising her 2 children, Jake and Emily. Her days started early, at 4 a.m. When the world was still asleep. She would roll out dough for bread, chop vegetables for her soups, and stir batter for pies, all using recipes passed down from her grandmother. Each dish carried a piece of her family's story, infused with love and care. Yet, no matter how much effort she put in, the reality of her situation was grim. Business had slowed to a crawl in recent months. The bills on her counter seemed to multiply every week. And despite her tireless work, the earnings barely covered the diner's rent, let alone the other expenses. Sarah often found herself sitting alone after closing, staring at the numbers, hoping for a miracle. Her heart ached most when she thought about Jake and Emily. They needed new school supplies, winter clothes, and shoes that didn't pinch their growing feet. One evening, as the rain poured relentlessly, Sarah sat in the diner, the emptiness pressing down on her. She considered closing early. Rainy nights rarely brought customers, but something made her stay. Perhaps it was the quiet resolve that had kept her going all these years. The bell above the door jingled, pulling Sarah from her thoughts. An elderly man stepped in, his clothes soaked through and his grey hair plastered to his forehead. He hesitated near the entrance, his worn hat clutched in trembling hands, water pooling at his feet. There was an air of fragility about him, but also a quiet dignity that touched Sarah deeply. She grabbed a clean towel from behind the counter and walked over to him with a warm smile. "You're drenched," she said gently, handing him the towel. "Come in. Sit down. Let me get you something warm." The man hesitated, his eyes filled with both gratitude and embarrassment. "I haven't eaten in 3 days," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't have any money." Sarah felt her chest tighten. She saw not just a hungry man before her, but the echo of her own past. She remembered her first year in America, the long nights of hunger, and the desperate scrimping to make sure Jake and Emily had enough to eat. The memory was a sharp pang, but also a reminder of how far she had come. "Don't worry about that," she said, guiding him to a corner table. "Let me take care of you tonight." Despite his protests, Sarah was already in the kitchen, turning the stove back on. She reached for the ingredients to make her grandmother's chicken soup, a recipe she reserved for her family on special occasions. As the soup simmered, she baked a fresh batch of bread, the comforting aroma filling the diner. While she worked, Sarah's thoughts drifted to her late father. The old man reminded her of him in some ways, the kind eyes, the quiet demeanor. She wondered if her father had ever gone hungry without telling anyone, sparing his family the pain. The thought made her heart ache. When the soup was ready, she served it with a generous portion of bread and packed some extra food in a paper bag. "You'll need this for tomorrow," she said as she placed the meal in front of him. The man's hands shook as he picked up the spoon. He took a small taste, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. "This," "This tastes like home," he said softly. His voice carried a mixture of gratitude and nostalgia. And for a moment, Sarah saw a glimmer of life return to his weary face. He began to share snippets of his story. His name was Henry. He had been an accountant for 3 decades before the company he worked for downsized. He lost his job and spent his savings on medical bills after his wife's passing. Now, he lived day to day, trying to hold on to his dignity. Sarah listened intently, her heart aching for him. She shared a bit of her own story, too, how she had moved to America with dreams of a better life, only to lose her husband and raise 2 children on her own. She spoke about the diner, her hopes for its future, and the struggles she faced to keep it running. As the rain eased outside, the two sat together, their stories weaving a tapestry of resilience and shared humanity. Henry ate slowly, savoring every bite, as if committing the meal to memory. For Sarah, it wasn't just about the food. It was about giving Henry a moment of dignity, of comfort, and a reminder that he wasn't alone. When Henry finished, he leaned back with a contented sigh, his face brighter, his posture stronger. He thanked Sarah quietly, his voice carrying a depth of gratitude that words couldn't fully express. As he stood to leave, Henry pulled out a small notepad and wrote something on a piece of paper. He placed the folded note on the table and gave Sarah a small, knowing smile. "You don't need to leave anything," Sarah said, trying to wave him off. "It's not what you think," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "You've done more for me tonight than I can ever repay." With that, he walked out into the night, the rain now a gentle drizzle. Sarah watched him disappear into the shadows, her heart heavy with both hope and uncertainty. She approached the table and unfolded the note, expecting a simple thank you message. But what she read made her hands tremble. Her pulse quickened as her eyes scanned the words again and again. The note wasn't just a thank you. It was a business card, accompanied by a handwritten message that hinted at something far greater than she could have imagined. Sarah sat down, the weight of the moment sinking in. She clutched the note, feeling a strange mix of disbelief and hope stir within her. In that quiet, empty diner, something profound had shifted. It wasn't just an act of kindness that had passed between them, it was the beginning of something life-changing. Sarah sat in her diner, holding the note Henry had left behind. Her hands trembled as she read the words over and over, trying to make sense of them. The note wasn't what she expected at all. Instead of a simple thank you, it revealed a startling truth about the old man who had quietly eaten in the corner of her diner just moments ago. The note read, "I've been observing your diner for some time. Your kindness and dedication have not gone unnoticed. You treat every customer like family and pour love into everything you do. That's the kind of person I've been looking for, someone with skill, heart, and resilience. My name is Henry Carter. I was once the chief financial officer of a major restaurant chain. Though I lost my position due to downsizing, I've maintained connections with influential figures in the restaurant industry. I will return tomorrow with people who can help you realize the full potential of your diner. Your generosity tonight confirmed what I suspected. You are the kind of person who deserves success. Until then, rest easy, knowing that help is on the way." The words seemed surreal. Could this elderly man, who had looked so fragile and worn, truly be connected to powerful people in the restaurant world? Sarah's mind raced with questions. Was this some kind of prank? But the sincerity in his eyes, the warmth in his voice, and the business card he left alongside the note made her believe otherwise. Henry Carter. The name sounded familiar. Sarah vaguely remembered seeing it in a magazine article years ago about successful restaurateurs. She had always admired stories of people who built something from nothing, just as she had dreamed of doing with her own diner. The thought that someone like Henry had seen potential in her little restaurant filled her with a mix of disbelief and cautious hope. That night, Sarah barely slept. Her thoughts were consumed with possibilities. Could this really be the turning point she had been praying for? She imagined Jake and Emily finally having what they needed: new clothes, proper school supplies, and maybe even a few luxuries she had long denied herself. The next morning, Sarah woke up earlier than usual, her nerves and excitement driving her into action. She cleaned the diner from top to bottom, scrubbing every surface until it shone. She baked extra bread and made fresh batches of soup, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. Every time the doorbell jingled, her heart leapt, thinking it might be Henry and the mysterious investors he had promised to bring. But the morning passed uneventfully, with the usual handful of regular customers stopping by for coffee and breakfast. By lunchtime, Sarah was beginning to doubt if Henry would return at all. Just as she was about to close the kitchen for a quick break, the bell above the door rang. Sarah turned, her breath catching in her throat. Henry was back, but he looked completely transformed. Gone were the worn clothes and fragile demeanor. He wore a tailored suit that fit him perfectly, and his posture was confident, almost regal. Yet his kind eyes were the same, and when he smiled at Sarah, it was as though they shared a secret. Behind him were 3 people dressed in business attire, 2 men and a woman. They introduced themselves as colleagues and investors who had worked alongside Henry in the restaurant industry for years. "We've heard a lot about you, Sarah," one of the men said warmly. "Henry speaks very highly of your diner and your vision." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. She was used to being unnoticed, toiling away quietly in the background. Now, here were people with real influence, standing in her little diner and looking at her as though she were someone extraordinary. The group took their seats and ordered various items from her menu. Sarah's hands trembled as she prepared each dish, but she put her heart into the food, just as her grandmother had always taught her. "Food made with love always tastes better," her grandmother used to say. And Sarah believed it wholeheartedly. As the investors ate, they spoke quietly among themselves, nodding approvingly as they tasted her cooking. Henry walked around the diner, pointing out the small details that made it special: the checkered curtains, the hand-painted menu board, the personal touches that Sarah had added over the years. "This is where the magic happens," he said with a smile, gesturing at the cozy interior. Sarah couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. After nearly 2 hours, the group finished their meals and gathered around the counter. Sarah stood nervously, wiping her hands on her apron as they spoke. "We want to invest in your diner," one of the men said. "It's clear you've built something special here. Our plan is to help you expand while keeping everything that makes this place unique. With your recipes and your approach to customer care, we believe your diner could grow into a successful chain." Sarah blinked, her mind struggling to process their words. A chain? She had always dreamed of seeing her diner thrive, but she had never dared to imagine something on this scale. "We'll help you open 5 more locations across the city," the woman added. "And we'll ensure that your grandmother's recipes remain the heart of the business. Your chicken soup will be our signature dish." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she realized what this meant. This wasn't just about saving her diner, it was about building a future for her family. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of her struggles begin to lift. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me." Henry smiled, his kind eyes twinkling. "It wasn't just about the food, Sarah. Your kindness that night showed me the kind of person you are. That's what makes this place special. That's what makes you special." As the group left, Sarah stood in the doorway, watching them disappear down the street. Her heart swelled with gratitude, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. The note Henry had left the night before now felt like a lifeline, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, a single act of compassion could lead to unimaginable opportunities. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Sarah. Henry and his team wasted no time turning their words into action. Contracts were drafted, plans were drawn up, and meetings became a regular part of Sarah's life. It felt surreal. Only a week ago, she had been agonizing over unpaid bills and contemplating selling her wedding ring. Now, She was discussing expansion plans and meeting with investors who saw her diner as something extraordinary. The first change came quickly. The diner expanded into the empty storefront next door. The renovations were modest but thoughtful, ensuring that the charm of Sarah's cozy diner wasn't lost. The faded red and white checkered curtains remained, but everything else received a gentle update, a fresh coat of paint, new tables and chairs, and updated kitchen equipment that Sarah had only ever dreamed of. The investors were true to their word. Sarah's grandmother's recipes became the centerpiece of the menu, with her chicken soup highlighted as the diner's signature dish. "This is the heart of your business," one of the investors had said. "It represents everything that makes this place special: love, tradition, and comfort." For Sarah, the most significant change wasn't the physical transformation of her diner, it was the people. For years, she had worked alone, cooking, cleaning, and serving customers with little to no help. Now, with the investors' support, she was able to hire a full team of staff. She made it a point to hire people who needed a second chance: single parents, students, and individuals who had faced hardships like her own. Sarah remembered what it felt like to be struggling and unseen, and she vowed to create a workplace where everyone felt valued and supported. "No one leaves hungry," she told her new staff during their first meeting. "Even if they can't pay. That's how we do things here." The staff quickly embraced Sarah's philosophy, and the diner became more than just a restaurant, it became a community hub. Regular customers still came for their morning coffee and comfort food. But now there were new faces. Two people who had heard about Sarah's story and wanted to experience the magic of her diner for themselves. Meanwhile, Sarah's home life began to change in ways she had only dared to dream of. With the diner thriving, she could finally provide for Jake and Emily in ways she hadn't been able to before. She bought them new clothes and school supplies, and even moved them to a better apartment closer to their school. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Jake and Emily were proud of their mother. On weekends, they started helping out at the diner, learning the recipes and the values that had made it successful. "It's not just about the food," Sarah would tell them. "It's about how you make people feel. Every customer should feel like family." As the months went by, the investors kept their promise to expand the diner into a chain. By the end of the year, 5 new locations had opened across the city, each one modeled after the original diner. Sarah personally trained every cook, ensuring that her grandmother's recipes were followed to the letter. Each location maintained the same warm, welcoming atmosphere. The red and white checkered curtains were replicated, and the menus featured Sarah's personal touch. Customers who walked into any of the diners felt the same sense of comfort and care that had made the original so special. Despite the rapid growth of her business, Sarah remained grounded. She continued to spend most of her time at the original diner, greeting customers with her familiar warm smile and occasionally stepping into the kitchen to whip up a batch of her famous chicken soup. Henry became a constant presence in Sarah's life. He served as her business advisor, guiding her through the complexities of managing multiple locations. He never mentioned the rainy night that had brought them together, but Sarah often caught him smiling quietly as he enjoyed a bowl of soup. One day, as Henry sat at his usual corner table, he shared something that had stayed with him since that night. "Your kindness wasn't just about the food, Sarah," he said. "It was about dignity. You treated me like a human being when I felt like I had nothing left. That's what sets you apart, and that's why your diners will always be successful." Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She thought about the framed note that hung in her office, a constant reminder of how one small act of compassion had changed her life. It wasn't just her life that had transformed, though. Through her diners, Sarah was now changing the lives of countless others. One afternoon, as she watched a young family enjoying a meal in her diner, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She thought back to the rainy evening when Henry had walked through her door. In that moment, she had simply wanted to help a man in need. She could never have imagined how that single act of kindness would set off a chain reaction, bringing hope and opportunity not just to her, but to so many others. Sarah's diners became a testament to the power of love, empathy, and resilience. Each one stood as a reminder that kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that were often unseen but deeply felt. As Sarah looked around her bustling diner, now the heart of a thriving chain, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. What had started as a small act of kindness, a warm bowl of soup for a stranger on a rainy night, had transformed her life in ways she never imagined. Henry's words echoed in her mind, "Kindness is about dignity." That simple truth had not only saved her diner but had become the foundation of everything she built. Her framed note from Henry hung in her office, a daily reminder of how far she had come. It wasn't just a story about success, it was a story about resilience, compassion, and the extraordinary power of empathy. Every day, Sarah carried forward the values that made her diners special, creating a space where every customer felt like family. Her children, now thriving, often helped at the diners, proud of their mother's legacy. Sarah knew that her journey wasn't just hers, it was a testament to the idea that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples that changed lives. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Life Stories for more heartwarming tales. See you in the next video.